The 23rd of March, 1902, Volume 4. The support of true sanctity is in the knowledge of self. After I struggled very much, my most sweet Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, the support of true sanctity is the knowledge of self." And I really, and he certainly, because with the knowledge of self, one undoes himself and leans completely on the knowledge he acquires of God in such a way that his operating is the very divine operating, since nothing is left of his own being. Then he added, when one's interior imbues and occupies itself with God alone and with all that belongs to him, God communicates all of himself to the soul. When her interior then occupies itself now with God, now with other things, God communicates himself to the soul in part. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1903, Volume 5. If a love is holy, it forms the life of sanctification. If it is perverted, the life of damnation. As I was in my usual state, after much struggling, for just a little I saw my adorable Jesus in my arms, and a light coming out of his forehead. Within this light, these words were written: "Love is everything for God and for man. If love ceased, life would cease. However, there are two species of love, one spiritual and divine, the other corporal and disordered. There is great difference between these two loves in intensity, multiplicity, diversity. One could say that there is almost a difference which exists between the thinking of the mind and the operating of the hands. In a very short time, the mind can think of 100 things, while the hands can only perform one work. God is the creator, and if he creates the creatures, it is love alone that makes him create. If he keeps all of his attributes in continuous attitude toward creatures, it is love that pushes him to this, and his very attributes receive life from love. The same for a disordered love, like the love of riches, of pleasures, and of many other things. These are not the things that form the life of man, but if he feels love for these things, not only do they come to form his life, but he reaches the point of making of them his own idol. So, if a love is holy, it forms the life of sanctification. If it is perverted, it forms the life of damnation. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1905, Volume 6. Glory and Satisfaction of Jesus. As I was in my usual state, blessed Jesus came for a little, and I said to him, "Lord, is my state your glory?" And he, "My daughter, all of my glory and all my satisfaction is solely that I want the whole of you more in me." Then he added, "Everything is in the soul's distrust and fear of herself, and in her trust and confidence in God." Having said this, he disappeared. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1910, Volume 9. Living in the divine will is greater than communion itself. As I was in my usual state and lamenting because of his privations, he came just in passing and told me, "My daughter, I recommend that you not get out of my will, because my will contains such power as to be a new baptism for the soul, and even more than baptism itself. In fact, while in the sacraments there is part of my grace, in my will there is the fullness, the whole fullness of it. In the baptism, the stain of original sin is removed, but passions and weaknesses remain. In my will, since the soul destroys her own volition, she also destroys passions, weaknesses, and all that is human, and she lives of the virtues, of the fortitude, and of all the divine qualities. On hearing this, I said to myself, in a little while he's going to say that his will is greater than communion itself. And he added, of course, because the sacramental communion lasts a few minutes, while my will is perennial communion, even more eternal, entering eternity in heaven. The sacramental communion is subject to some obstacles, either because of illness or necessity, or because of those who have to administer it, while the communion of my will is not subject to any hindrance. If the soul only wants it, all is done. No one can prevent her from having such a great good, which forms the happiness of the earth and of the heaven and of heaven, neither demons nor creatures, and not even my omnipotence itself. The soul is free. No one has any right over her at this point of my will. This is why I push it, and I want so much that creatures take it. It is the most important thing for me, the thing which I cherish the most. All other things do not interest me as much, not even the holiest one. And when I obtain that the soul live in my will, I feel triumphant, because this is the greatest good which can exist in heaven and on earth. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1920, Volume 12. The soul wants hiddenness, and Jesus wants her as light. I was saying to my sweet Jesus, I would like to hide myself to the point of disappearing from everyone, and so that everyone would forget about me, as if I no longer existed on earth. How heavy it is for me, having to deal with people. I feel all the necessity of a deep silence. And he, moving in my interior, told me, you want to hide yourself, and I want you as a candelabra, which must give light. This candelabra will be lit by the reflections of my eternal light. Therefore, if you want to hide, you do not hide yourself, but you hide me, my light, and my word. After this, I continued to pray, and I don't know how. I found myself outside of myself together with Jesus. I was small, while Jesus was big, and he told me, my daughter, stretch yourself so as to equal me. I want your arms to reach my arms and your mouth to reach mine. I didn't know how to do that because I was too small. And Jesus placed his hands within mine and repeated, stretch, stretch yourself. I tried, and I felt like a spring, such that if I wanted to stretch, I got longer. Otherwise, I remained small. So I easily stretched myself, and I leaned my head upon Jesus' shoulder while he continued to keep his hands in mine. At the contact with his most holy hands, I was reminded of the wounds of Jesus, and I told him, my love, you want me to equal you. So why don't you give me your pains? Give them to me. Don't deny them to me. Jesus looked at me and pressed me tightly to his heart, as if he wanted to tell me many things. Then he disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1921, Volume 12. The divine will renders the soul little. Louisa is the littlest of all. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, together with Jesus, and I said to him, my love, I want you to hear what I do to enter your volition, to see whether you like it or not. So I said what I usually say when I enter his will, which I don't think it is necessary to repeat here, since I have said it somewhere else. And Jesus gave me a kiss, approving with his kiss. of what I was saying to him. Then he said to me, "My daughter, my will has the special virtue of rendering souls little, making them become so little as to feel the extreme need for my will to administer life to them. Their littleness is such that they are unable to make one act or take one step if my will does not administer that act or that step to them. So they live completely at the expense of my will, because their littleness carries no baggage, either of things from their own or of love of self. Rather, they take everything from my will, and not to keep it for themselves, but to give it to me. And since they need everything, they live dissolved in my will. Listen, I went round the earth over and over again. I looked at all creatures, one by one, in order to find the littlest of all. Among many, I found you, the littlest of all. I liked your littleness, and I chose you. I entrusted you to my angels, so that they might keep you, not to make you grow, but to preserve your littleness. And now I want to begin the great work of the fulfillment of my will. Nor will you feel greater because of this. On the contrary, my will make you even smaller, and you will continue to be the little daughter of your Jesus, the little daughter of my will. End of the reading. The 23rd of March, 1923, Volume 15. The Sorrows of the Celestial Mama and how the Divine Fiat acted in them. I was thinking of the sorrows of my Celestial Mama, and my lovable Jesus moving in my interior told me, "My daughter, I was the first king of sorrows, and being man and God, I had to centralize everything within me in order to have primacy over everything, even over sorrows. Those of my mamma were nothing other than the reverberations of mine, which being reflected in her, made her share in all my sorrows, which, piercing her, filled her with such bitterness and pain that she felt herself dying at each reverberation of my sorrows. But love sustained her and gave her life again. Therefore, not only for honour, but also by right of justice, she was the first queen of the immense sea of her sorrows." While he was saying this, I seemed to see my mamma in front of Jesus, and everything that Jesus contained, the sorrows and the piercings of that most holy heart, were reflected in the heart of the sorrowful queen. At those reflections, many swords formed in the heart of the pious mamma, and these swords were marked by a fiat of light in which she was so confused. In the midst of so many fiats of most refulgent light, which gave her so much glory that there are no words to narrate it. Then Jesus continued, saying, "It was not the sorrows that constituted my mamma as queen and made her shine with so much glory, but it was my omnipotent fiat, which was braided to her every act and sorrow, and constituted itself life of each of her sorrows. So my fiat was the first act that formed the sword, giving her the intensity of pain it wanted. My fiat could place all the sorrows it wanted in that pierced heart, adding piercings upon piercings, pains upon pains, without a shadow of the slightest resistance. On the contrary, she felt honoured that my fiat would constitute itself life of even a heartbeat of hers, and my fiat gave her complete glory and constituted her true and legitimate queen. Now, who will be the souls in whom I can reflect the reverberations of my sorrow and of my life? Those who will have my fiat as life. This fiat will make them absorb my reflections, and I will be generous in sharing with them that which my will operates in me. Therefore, in my will do I await souls, to give them the true dominion and the complete glory of each act and pain that they may suffer. The operating and suffering outside of my will I do not recognize. I could say, I have nothing to give you. What is the will that animated in doing and suffering this? Get your reward from that one. Many times doing good or suffering, if my will is not present in them, can be miserable slaveries which degenerate into passion, while it is my will alone that gives true dominion, true virtues, true glory, such as to transform the human into divine. End of the reading. The 23rd of March 1931, Volume 29. How to feel one's will is one thing, to want it is another. The most beautiful rest that the divine will wants to give. Triple acts in the act of the creature. My abandonment in the divine volition continues, but the circumstances in which I currently find myself are such and so many that my poor human will would want to, as though pop out from all sides of my being, to have some act of life, and I feel all the enormous weight. I feel myself being pressed, crushed under my human will. Oh, how true it is that it is the cruelest tyrant. My Jesus, help me. Do not abandon me. Do not leave me at the mercy of my will. If you want, you can. Put it under the sweet empire of your divine will. My beloved Jesus, making himself seen and heard, told me, my daughter, courage. Do not worry so much. To feel the weight of one's will says nothing. It is a pain more painful than all other pains, and if you had wanted it, it would no longer be pain, but the pain would change into satisfaction. To feel is one thing, to want is another. So banish the thought that you always commit sins because you feel your will. Therefore do not fear, I am watching you. And when I see that it wants life in your things, I give you the pain so as to make it die of pain. So trust your Jesus, because what harms you the most is the lack of trust. It is always this that causes souls to be restless, even when I keep them clasped in my arms. And then, this pain of feeling the weight of the human will. Oh, how much did your Jesus feel it? More vividly, as it lasted my whole life. Therefore, mine and yours, let us unite them together, and let us offer them for the triumph of my will in souls. So put everything aside, and come to rest in my divine will. My will, with all love, awaits you in the centre of my heart in order to love you. And the most beautiful love that it wants to give you is rest in the pains that you suffer. Oh, how sweet, refreshing it is to see our daughter, whom we love and who loves us, rest. And while she rests, it wants to pour upon you the celestial dew of the light of my divine will. My will, in the unity of its light, does always one act, nor does it ever cease doing it, and only when it is not subject to interruption, then can an act be called complete. This act, never interrupted, says everything, embraces, loves all. From its height, in which this act never says enough, it casts an infinity of effects that make it hold heaven and earth as though in its power. And it communicates to creatures the celestial dew of the effects of its sanctity, of its love, and of its divine life. But these effects convert for the creature into acts in such a way that she feels within herself the act of the divine life, of light, of sanctity, of love. And the creature who lives in my will forms in it her life, her nourishment, and grows under the reign of the celestial dew of the single act of her Creator. And these effects, changing into acts in the creature, form her little sun that with its little reflection says, love, glory, continuous honour to the one who created me. So the divine sun and the sun formed by my divine will in the creature meet continuously. They wound each other. The little sun is transformed into the immense sun of the eternal one, and they form life together, loving each other with love reciprocal and never interrupted. This continuous love inebriates and puts to sleep the human volition and gives the most beautiful rest to the creature. After this, I continued my acts in the divine will, and I comprehended how, when we dispose ourselves to do an act, the divine volition, before we do the act, places in it its prime act to give the life of the act in the creature. And my sweet Jesus added, my daughter, in each act of the creature, there is a triple act. First, the creative strength forms the act. The creature, over the act of the creative strength, forms the act of her operating love, which is nourished by the creative strength. And according to the intensity of the love of the creature, its prolixity, the good, the value that her act contains, so does it receive more or less nourishment of the creative strength. In fact, there is no taste and delight for God more beautiful and pleasing than nourishing the acts of the creature. And this because in seeing something of our own in the human act, we feel we are the masters recognized by them. We feel them as our children, not the children far away, but close, even more identified with us, surrounding us like a crown, as many children of ours who justly want from our own. And we, with all love, gladly give our nourishment to their acts. Also, since nourished by us, they will grow as noble children, worthy of their celestial Father. Now, after the act of the creative strength and the act of the operating love of the creature, follows the act of the love of completion. Each act could not be called complete, nor be given the just value. One comma, one point, one shade were missing, whatever it might be. If a work is not complete, not only can one not give it value, but one cannot earn honour and glory. So, after the operating love arises the love of gratitude, of thanksgiving, and of giving to God what is of God. The creature received from God the first act of her operating. She continued it with her operating love, but nourished by God, she completed it with a greater love by giving to God from what from God had its origin. Here is the final point, and the most beautiful shade of the act of the creature, to which God Himself deigns to give His divine appreciation, and feels honoured and glorified by the little gift received. And by virtue of this, He gives more occasions to let the creature do more acts, so as to keep her always close and in continuous correspondence. End of the reading. There are no more readings today.